A reluctant priest is sent back into time to perform an exorcism on an evil dinosaur who has been summoned by satanic forces to destroy modern-day Earth. This week, we follow on a similar path as last week's episode, as this was recommended, and I certainly couldn't pass up spending the $2.99 on renting it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jurassic Exorcist. I'm going to be upfront with you guys on this one. It was a rough watch, but I don't want to ruin it for you guys. So welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Movie Review. We open the movie with a view. It's basically a giant canyon, and there's an ominous voice talking about how since the beginning of time we fought a battle of good versus evil, and you can't have one without the other. And my initial reaction was like, wow, the CGI is really good. It looked pretty good. And then after about 21 seconds, it's gone. We fast forward to modern times, and we see a Chinook landing in a field, and a bunch of soldiers are getting out of it, and it takes off, and all of a sudden, like, that's just it. And then we see this like run-down barn, and there's a cult, obviously, as a movie like this would have, performing a ritual called the Night of the Blister-Tongue Beast, whatever that means. They're all wearing essentially what looked like masks that they bought from the dollar store. They're just plain masks, nothing special about them. And robes, naturally. Cults love robes. The man that is doing the talking says that the FBI and their minions of the dead, Jesus, came and took the sister wives. And then then they show a dude in a red robe just like laying on the ground, and apparently he's dead. And he's their leader, I guess. But he was, and I quote, slain by government bullets. They have a lady that they had taken hostage, and they're going to use her blood because they need a virgin. They cut her arm and then drip it on their leader's face, and nothing happens. The dude talking gets all upset, and because she's not a virgin, obviously, and she just like laughs, which is kind of weird. You know, she's being held hostage by a cult, and they're like, "Oh, you've been laid," and she's like, "Yeah, I have." Side note: when this lady first came out, I totally thought it was a Alicia Silverstone, and I was like, "Wow, she must be really hard up for work if she's in this." But after checking the credits, I'm happy for her that it's not. They end up showing the leader's face up close, and the dude is clearly trying very hard to keep his eyes closed. And we are then see the camera start shaking. Everything starts shaking. You hear this like ominous laugh out, and there's flashing lights, and all of a sudden a claymation dinosaur just pops up, and he ends up eating the dude that was doing the talking the whole time. And they this is ridiculous. Apparently the leader of the cult, he's alive again. He opens his eyes and smiles as our non-virgin hostage runs away. Why I tried to put that all in one. We then see a soldier who's laying in the tree line, and he's wearing a mixture of BDU, which has not been around for quite a while, and an olive drab jacket that kind of resembled a members only jacket. But the best part of his uniform was the early 2000s earpiece he has in, and the fact that he's wearing a plastic costume helmet. But he sees our hostage running, and he gets on the radio and says, "We got a runner. It's the girl." And then he lets the people on the radio, other end of the radio, which must be his command. He lets them know that he hasn't seen, and I quote, "them satanic douches that got away," and the person responds with, "Stay frosty." He is then like, "You ain't got to worry about me. I went to scarier metal concerts in the 80s. At this point, my skin's crawling because this is the worst radio etiquette I've ever heard. And like, who actually uses the term "stay frosty"? I don't know. I would tell them to clear the net, but I digress. The person on the other end is like, yeah, who's the best you saw? And he's like, "Ozzy, man, second best." Second best. And then he gets cut off because our claymation dino is back, and he eats the lady who had a hell of a head start. But she got caught. And like, the dinosaur really didn't even walk at all. He was just outside of the barn and just ate her. But she was like at least 300 to 400 yards away from the barn. I don't know. The soldier is then like, "Not on my watch," and keeps repeating "not on my watch" as he opens fire and lone wolfs the dinosaur, and then he just gets eaten. We hear on the radio the monotone voice again, and it's like, "What's going on? Do you copy? What's going on? You copy?" We see the dead cult leader, that's not dead anymore, is controlling the dinosaur with his light up eyes, and they both just vanish. So all of this happens, and then we finally get the opening credits, which took way too long. And once those are done, we are given a montage of scenes of a small town as we hear a sermon from a priest. And when we finally end at the church, we lay eyes on the first priest I've ever seen giving a sermon in a Columbia fishing shirt buttoned all the way up with his little white placard. And he ends his sermon with, "As for me, I'm fighting the good fight, and I'm running the race, and I'm keeping the faith." And he looked concerned, and he repeats, "keeping the faith." Personally, I just think he couldn't think of any other ways to say the same thing without breaking out in a rendition of "Staying Alive," but it is what it is. So now we see our pastor, and he's outside of the church. And this lady comes walking out, and she hands him a pan of something and is like, "Father, can I ask you a question? Like a serious question?" And he's like, "Of course." So then she asks, is evil real? Like, real? And apparently there's no news channels there, because he's like gives because there's evil everywhere. I mean, come on now, we know it's real. And he, no matter what he says to this woman, she just keeps asking if evil's real. And then finally he gets away from her and walks to his car. And he like stops and kind of leans on it, and he looks around and says, "Today there is no evil in the air." And that was the end of that scene. And then we get a brief shot of of our dino in the woods. The cult leader is in the woods, and the priest is pulling up on a gravel drive to go walk into the woods where they just also happen to be, and walks down this weird path and sits at this run-down concrete picnic table to eat the food the lady gave him. And some random dude walks up, it's out of nowhere, and he's like, "Can I sit down?" And then the pastor offers the dude some food, and he says no. And then is like, the priest is like, "Do I know you?" And the guy says, "No, Father, I'm just passing through. It is beautiful here, but I've never been here before." And then Father Bennett, which this is when we finally learned his name, Father Bennett is like, "You look vaguely familiar." And the random dude says that he gets that a lot, and that it sure is a beautiful day despite all that ruckus with the cult. They continue their conversation until Bennett does a double take off into the distance to see the cult leaders just standing there smiling at him. When he looks back at the dude sitting with him, he's gone. And then we just change scene to two random people sitting in a control room with like 3 monitors and a soundboard. And the guy says, "Dude, this is weird." And the other person, the second person, is this older lady, and she's like, "Stop playing Space Invaders, all right? What is it?" And he says, "There was just this. Never mind." And that was the whole scene. That's as far as it went. Bennett is now packing up for the conference that he's heading to, and says something about smiting evil, and then we go back to the people in the control room, and they're like, "Oh, it's back. It's a temporal wave," but don't explain anything because they're just gone. And then we see another horribly dressed soldier, and we hear over the radio, "We are bringing in air support," and we see 3 jets with the red stars on them. So I guess they are working with the Russians to capture this cult. I don't know. Soldier sees a cult member run up to the barn, and he's like 15 feet away from him, and he opens fire in full auto, and he misses every single shot. And then the cult member runs into the barn, and when the soldier runs in, the radio says, "Fall back. We have to see what you got." But he just keeps going. The cult member is now hiding in front of a truck with a machete, and he goes to hit the soldier, but he catches him first and just gives him like a very light tap in the face, like with a magazine of his rifle, and knocks the cult member out. He's very weak. But then he just comes right back to consciousness, and you hear a super echoey voice coming out of him that says, "The stars are staring at us behind the sun. Brother Arcady lives outside of time. He has joined with the fiery beast." But the soldier then just like butt stocks him, and he's out again. We then see our clay dino is back, and the soldier says, "Now things are getting good," and again misses with every single shot. So now this time he's even closer, and he's shooting at a T-Rex, and he still can't hit him. He calmly sets his machine gun down and pulls out a grenade and says, "All right, big guy, come to daddy." And that's when Brother Arcady, the cult leader, is back. it makes the soldier like all jittery, and then the grenade just blows up. Like he never even pulled the pin out of it, which is pretty essential, but whatever. Then we see a couple more soldiers walking through the woods, and then Brother Arcady is again just standing there with his arms crossed. The soldiers try to fight the dino, but one is killed, and the other one says it's scaly and fugly, and then proceeds to miss every shot as well. At this point, I'm pretty sure that this was a precursor to the training stormtroopers got, because their aim is just about as good. The soldier, the one that didn't get eaten, obviously, tells the people over the radio to drop the bombs on his location before he gets eaten, obviously. And then we see the bombs land in the really good-looking CGI canyon, and from the opening scene. And once all the flames and explosions go away, there's absolutely no damage anywhere, and the dino's still alive. We are now back to see our two friends in the control room, and they are the dude walks into the control room, and the lady says, "I just put on a fresh pot of coffee," and he's like, "I just went through the drive-thru to get us some sandwiches for later, but I got these hot dogs for right now, and for some reason there's a dog treat on top and no condiments." So dog treat, 0 condiments. These two people are clearly psychopaths. But they get in an argument about how the hot dogs are actually for dogs, and the lady's like, "That's why they call it the big dog," and the dude says, "Don't act like you never ate a dog biscuit when you were little." And then she asks him if he activated the device, which to this point, I had no idea what device they're talking about. And he's like, "No, did you?" And she says, "We promised we would only do it once." And he says, "That was a pinky swear. Don't act like that's nothing. Do you think it's us from the future? We broke the pinky swear." They then go on about the time wave being from the past, and end scene. We're now back with Bennett. He's in his car now driving, and he's listening to a newscast about how the Army and FBI are joining forces to catch the remaining members of the cult, and calls it a bold move, which doesn't really seem like that bold. Like, it would have been bolder if they were like, the Army is going to use chicken quesadillas to lure the remaining members of the cult. Like, that would have been more bold. But a soldier who clearly does not pass height or weight walks out in front of Bennett, and it's a good thing he's only driving like 12 miles an hour down this road, because he stops just in time. And the soldier's like, "Evil is coming," and then he dies. So Bennett like gives him last rites, and then he just drags his body out to the side of the road. And then he hears a sound in the woods, stops and looks around, and we see Brother Arcady making his eyes light up red. And when they do, he also makes the sound that I vaguely remember hearing in old College Humor videos, like at the end of it. I don't know. And Bennett apparently gets a really bad headache and is seeing flashing of the scene in the barn at the beginning and hearing a weird voice mumbling. So he just runs and gets back into his car and leaves the soldier's dead body there. And then Clay Dino shows up and roars at him. He screams and drives away. He's driving very erratically at this point. And he keeps saying, "I seen evil, not enough faith, not enough faith." And somehow he crashes, but like the car is barely off the road, and there's just like some twigs on the hood. And he gets out, and must have got a really bad concussion from this accident, because then he just wanders off into the woods. So then we skip to a different scene now. We see a Kia Soul driving up into an empty field, and this lady and a guy get out, and he's like, "Do you think we are lost?" And she says, "Do I look like I know how to navigate gravel roads?" So then the dude just naturally grabs a camera out of the back seat, and he starts filming the trees. And she's like, "Why? What are you filming that for?" And he's like, "B-roll, obviously." And then she's like, "Where's the FBI guys? SWAT, sister wives, with the big 80s hair, dudes in cloaks, bullet casings." And then she runs out of things to list. And then she just really starts to tear into this guy. Like, she's like, "I didn't get them. I didn't get us lost. They wouldn't, talking about how they would never choose him to host his own primetime nature show. They wouldn't even hire him to host a kid's birthday party." And then she really gives him the stab and says, "You're probably not even allowed within 500 feet of a school. You look like a pack of sweaty taints." This point is the highlight of the whole movie, what she called him. And it's officially going into my vocabulary. But our dino's back. And the two of them run to the Kia, and they drive away just in time. And the lady is like, get the shot. And then says, "If you get the shot, I'll let you take me out when we get back to the city." And he's like, "I'm gay. Actually, I'm being sarcastic, but thinking about a date with you makes me wish I were." And then he starts shaking her from the back seat, and somehow she stalls the car out. He's like, "So you were probably just joking about that date?" And she's like, "Yeah, but I would have gave you a copy of my B-roll, and you could have jerked off to that for a while." And thankfully, the dinosaur's back now. And she's like, "Oh, it can't see us if we aren't moving or making noise," as she's moving and making noise. And her cell phone starts going off, and the dude, for some reason, decides to get out of the car, and thankfully gets eaten. So now she is trying to record the newscast on her own, and we see she sees Brother Arcady in the woods, and he's playing hide and seek with her, and he's hiding behind trees that are not wide enough to actually hide him. And so she's following him and recording him while she is talking smack, saying things like, "Hey, Colt, man, you can't sacrifice me. Not a virgin," which I bet is a surprise. And then she walks up on some mannequins that are supposed to be the dead soldiers. And then there's one real person who just casually looks up at her, and she's like, "I'll call 911 right after I get this story out." And then he dies, and the dino shows up and ends all of her suffering because he eats her. The lady who kept asking about evil to Father Bennett is back now, and she's apparently a reporter as well. And the dude from the control room is watching the newscast, and the reporter lady is like, "No one knows what the creature is, and we haven't found it in the couple 100 acres of land." And the control room guy is like, "I wonder." And then that's the end of that scene. So then we're back with Bennett. He's walking through the woods. There's a voiceover, but I can't tell if it's what Bennett is hearing or if it's just for us to listen, as he's walking through. And Arcady just keeps showing up with his arms crossed in various places. And then Bennett comes up to what looks like a water treatment plant and is leaning against the fence when he sees that dude that sat with him in the woods to eat. And then control room guy happens to pull up, and Bennett asks for help, and the control room guy is like, "You're lucky the electric fence isn't on. You're not supposed to be here. Let's get you inside. It's against the rules, but who's going to know?" So then he asks Bennett, what happened, and Bennett is like, car accident. I was chased by a dinosaur on my way to a seminar convention, which I think seminars and conventions are the same thing. But then the control room guy is like, you're not one of those crazy TV televangelists, are you? I don't have any money. So he was like way more concerned about not having money than the fact that he was told there was a dinosaur on the loose. But then Bennett is like, it is a dinosaur, but it's not just a dinosaur. I sense something evil, and I seen Arcady, and I think they were an anti-government group disguised as a satanic group. So then the control room guy tells Bennett, we got to get you patched up. But like, I don't remember seeing him having any injuries. So I don't know what they were going to patch up. So control room lady, she's just like 2-finger button mashing on the keyboard because they couldn't find someone who understood where to put your fingers on a keyboard. And there's this like faint binary code flashing on the screen and blue blobs and an annoying beeping. And then there's also what looks like a first generation iPad that's like just kind of like floating there. And then there's like it's sitting on a CGI table. And there's a 3D rendering of a T-Rex shooting out of it, and it just keeps making roaring sounds. It's hard to explain. But then Bennett and control room guy pull up to whatever building the control room is, and it's apparently underground. And I quote, underground far enough to make your ears pop. And then Bennett is like, your boss is that one guy, Bobby Dugan, who made that video game and made $1 billion. And control room guy is like, my boss is Bobby Dugan, and he made the game Penny Raid Apocalypse and made $1 billion, and that's how he afforded all this. So then he like goes on a rant about like the Montauk project, which is funny because I was actually going to do an episode on that, so maybe I'll have to now that it came up in this. But whatever. We find out that Bobby bought all the stuff he needed for time travel on eBay because, and I quote, now that communism fell, everything in Russia is for sale. And then control room guy is going on about all these made up objects like the chronovisor Bobby bought from the Vatican. I don't know what any of these things were. But then they walk into the control room and he introduces Bennett to his lady partner. And this was actually the moment, and it's funny because this is the moment that I found out they've been saying Brennan the whole time and not Bennett. So going forward, Bennett is Brennan and Brennan is Bennett. They bring up the pinky swear and tell Brennan they have a time machine and it totally works. They've tried it twice. They don't want to tell Dugan about it because they think he only wants to use it to corner the Atari market. And then they go off with like 10 different examples of what they could do with it. And Brennan is like, I get it. Just like, I get it. Shut up. And he asks what they actually did with the time machine. And control room guy looks at Brennan, who, mind you, he just met, and is like, dude, you know I'm a huge Washington Redskins fan. And Brennan says, yeah. And control room guy tells him about Joe Theismann getting hurt, but never says what he actually did when he went back in time. And then control room lady goes on about something about the Beatles getting back together, but then also doesn't say what she did. And there's a lot more nonsensical talk that I had a really hard time paying attention to. Basically, they couldn't just send Brennan back a few days to stop all of this. He had to go millions of years back to exorcise the dino, which I'm done questioning things in this movie. So Brennan gets there, and we see like he goes back in time, And we see a bunch of really bad CGI brontosauruses. And then Brennan gets attacked by something that looks like a mixture of the 80s live-action Ninja Turtles and a gorilla. But, like, you can clearly see the person's skin through the mask, like, around his eyes. Like, it's clearly a mask. So then Brennan just, like, beats this thing in hand-to-hand combat. And is like, stay down. But then he has to stab it and says, I sure hope that wasn't the guy that invented fire. He then walks in. He then walks into the woods, and he finds a cave and is like, this is it. Pulls a lighter from his pocket and lights the club he's holding on fire, and then goes into the cave. And we see like some cave paintings that are clearly crayons on yellow construction paper, and then goes on for over a minute. The whole scene of cave paintings is over a minute long. So then Brennan ends up walking up on a velocipastor, raptor, and he just looks at it like he's not impressed, and it just wiggles around. Then he prays next to an actively erupting volcano that looks straight out of Microsoft Paint, right before he has to run because two mammoths are fighting, and they almost trample him, which I don't think velociraptors and mammoths and brontosauruses were all together around the same time. I could be wrong. I'm not a dinosaur scientist. But then, like, a giant orb made of fire shows up, and Brennan starts to follow it until it stops and starts talking to him. And Brennan is like, who are you? And it's the demon that the people were worshiping. And he is, I'm going to wipe out the dinosaurs so people can come. So, and then, like, that was supposed to end the debate. If a meteor wiped out dinosaurs, it was really a fire orb demon. And then, like, Brennan just, like, talks smack to it, and it disappears. And he's like, well, that was easy. But then Picnic Guy shows up and is like, it's not over yet. And then Arcady shows up out of nowhere and starts biting Brennan's arm. But he's like, it's like him as a human, but then he, like, flashes to where he's like a mini dinosaur too. I don't know. It was really weird. But then Brennan pulls out a cross and holds it up to Arcady, and he gets all twitchy. And then we see Clay Dino, and Brennan is like, please God, take away this creature thing. And but, like, he actually called it a creature thing. And then it worked. Our cowboy boot wearing priest did it. He walks into town, because he's back in modern times now. He walks into town and ends up at the church, and Abby, who is the evil real lady, and she's like, would you like to meet our local priest? That's him right there. And we see a dude wearing toe shoes, like those Vibram shoes where it's like each toe has its own little spot. And he's wearing these toe shoes, and he's walking up, and the camera starts panning upwards to show he also has a dragon sleeve tattoo and a black pocket t-shirt on, and it's Brother Arcady, naturally. So the two of them end up getting in an argument about dinosaurs and agree to have a final battle. And that's when Clay Dino is back, and he is trying to get into the church, but Brennan is super strong and holds the door shut. And then Picnic Guy is just waiting there in a pew and tells Brennan he has all the tools to win inside of him. And it turns out that Picnic Dude is Brennan's brother Greg, who died while he was disarming a bomb overseas, and he has been a ghost this whole time. So, naturally, Clay Dino gets into the church. But he is shrunk at this point. Like when he was outside, he was bigger than church. But now he's in the church, and he can fit inside of the church. And then Brennan goes and pulls, and these are clearly crosses that they took right, again, out of Microsoft Paint and photoshopped them onto the wall. And but this is all added way after all of this was filmed because Brennan was not very good at pretending like he was pulling something off the wall. But then he just stabs the clay dino and it disappears. And then Brennan leaves the church and he sees Greg, who waves and just walks away. And so then Brennan just sits down on the stairs of the church and pulls out his pocket Bible and he just starts reading. And that's the end of the movie. Jurassic Exorcist came out in 2024, surprisingly. And it was directed by Mark Polina. I don't know if I said that right. And I can't tell if it was trying to be bad. Like if that was the goal. But I'm going to give it a 2 on the Cryptid meter. Mainly just because it made me laugh from time to time. And they put some, like the effort that they put into it to possibly make it bad. They get a 2. But if I could get a few of you to like go to our PayPal and send me like a few cents each, I would really like to get my $3 back. That would be awesome. And honestly, if you've listened through this whole thing, you kind of owe me because this movie was 76 minutes long and I watched all of it. And I'm probably going to have to go sleep this one off. So until next week, thanks again for coming. Bye.